years ago, they had a pair of like boots that you put over your shoes so it didn't mark the floor. If anybody was working there, they had to wear these sort of looked like little felt slipper. This was great, and they had a tremendous place where they kept the harnesses, which were great big glass doors, and they slid back and forth, and all the various hooks for the saddles and the harnesses. Then in back of this, you walk through another door, and here were these stalls. Every horse had a window over his feed bin. Of course, he has feed bin in front. And they had beautiful posts with knobs on the end. And just instead of a straight horse stall top, it was nicely figured in sort of a slope with a little bend to it that went up. They had a nice iron grill where the hay was dropped in. They just didn't throw it in a manger in front. There was a manger. They had this nice iron grill. The thing was built sort of semicircle in the corner that held the hay. It was a beautiful building, and it could have been saved.
Do you know where all this woodwork and hardware went?
No, I don't.
No.
No,
Lost.
It's gone. The little house was completely offset 3/4 inch tongue and groove, hand planed. It had to be practically, because you could still see the saw marks on the wood. And that was in good shape. The front foundation had some water problems, washed it back at one time, but it was nothing that bothered the building. But they took it down for some reason. And the little granary, there was nothing wrong with that. The ice house, that was perfect, but that's gone. I do have pictures, and I know where they were, and I can mention them. But it would have more or less completed the lifestyle. And there was one thing on the carriage house that was very amazing, and they did this with hydraulics. It was a long tube that went up the side of it, and there was another room on the side of the carriage house where the coachman's assistant lived. It was usually a single man or a single boy. And this tube went up the side, and there was a big bell, and there was a thing that came out of the tube like this. I found out that Casimir set this up, and he had a line, a pipe that went from there down to the hall. And when he wanted the coachman, he had this thing, it was like a pump, and he'd just pump it up and down, and that would make the striker hit the bell and wake him up that somebody down below wanted some assistance in some way. And that thing actually operated. I remember seeing it there, and I finally got the story of it, but of course it's gone today.
What's this we're looking at here?
This is the coachman's house, or later referred to as the laundry. And this was adjacent.
No, this one's the ice house here, isn't
Oh,
it?
you got the ice house there? Oh, pardon me. This is the ice house, which was on the left-hand side of the stable. The top of it was a granary, and the bottom was an ice house because it was built right into a side hill. And that was used right up until we even used it when we had the farm. So it was in pretty good shape. Okay. Now this is what has been known as the laundry, but it was originally the coachman's house. And that was in quite good shape. It was all 3/4 inch grooved, half grooved tongue and groove lumber on the inside. It was a beautiful little home. It was in pretty fair shape. This is the stable. This is the side view. The road to the hall goes across in front of it. And this was the side view. And this was quite a building with a complete hardwood floor and beautiful horse stalls and so forth on it. And this was taken down at the time of the restoration. This is the back view of the laundry or the coachman's house. And there was a hedge that went all the way around it on 3 sides and back. And they had their clotheslines and everything out there. And the reason the shed is so high is because it was into a side hill, and all their wood was stored in the bottom of this building, and you could walk right out from the main floor and pick up your wood.
And all these buildings you showed us the pictures of were torn down at the time of the restoration.
They were all taken down. I don't know whether it was a reason of the cost of really putting them back in A1 condition. The stable, the roof was kind of bad, but the basic structures were good. The framework was good on them. And if I'd have had anything to do with it, I would have asked them to maintain it, but I was not involved in it, and that's the way it was.
Well, give us your thoughts on historic preservation in general.
Well, I think things that really go back to the early history of New York State and and the United States are the things that should be preserved, that really show the complete formation of, you might say, a civilized area. Because there's no question that the 4 million acres or so in the Macomb Purchase was complete wilderness. And to come up into something like this, and they didn't have cars, automobiles, airplanes, tractors, and everything we've got today. Horses, boats, and feet were about the major thing that was used for transportation. And these men had to have a lot of nerve, and in a good old-fashioned term, I would say a lot of guts, in order to even attempt to come up and survey something like we had here. At one time, they had the Black River in kind of the wrong place. They finally got it back where it is. And things like this, and there's an awful lot of property lines today that are questionable.
Are you sure they've got it in the right place? Because some of it spreads out awful here now, and maybe they got it in too flat an area.
I don't know how much moving they did, but some of the old maps showed it where they weren't too familiar where it was. It's just like in the Castellan Company, a lot of that surveying was done with compass to trees. When they came to really shoot some angles on it, they found out they were way off. And this was quite common, there's no question about it. Every once in a while, I don't know if you've noticed, sometimes in the tax notices you see a piece of land of William Constable. There's a piece down back of Lafargeville in a swamp. I think there was a couple acres in it. I saw it in the paper, so my son decided he'd go down and see what it was like. It's in the middle of a swamp. Well, I talked to quite a few of the powers in Lewis County on land and how some of these things happen. And there's even some pieces that have been reassessed to Hezekiah Pierpont. Well, he's been dead since 1820, and 1820. I mean, all these things are so far back. And I asked George Cataldo one time, how come, George, in the Lewis County Clerk's office, do these things show up, these little corners that nobody owns, that go back to the original owner, back 100 and some years? Well, he said, in a lot of cases, the person bought the land, the person they bought it from was a very nice guy, and he looked it over and he said, well, now that's all swamp down that corner, so we won't include that in the deed. In other words, you got it, but we won't put it in the deed because it isn't worth anything. And he said when they start resurveying, they pick up these things. And here are these little plots, maybe an acre, acre and a half, or maybe just a matter of feet. But it screws up anybody that's trying to go to a bank and get a loan on a complete piece of property, and here you find something that isn't recorded, and yet it still belongs to the guy who's been dead for 150, 60 years. What do? You almost need an act of Congress to straighten it out.
Doesn't go with the old adage of the tail going with the hide, then.
No, definitely not today. Everything is either it is or it isn't, especially when you're in land dealings. At the time the state was putting the new road through Constableville, they came right up across one of our major fields, also up what we used to call the upper fields, because the old road came down on actually the woods line to the Sugar River. From the top of the Mohawk Hill, it came right down along the edge there. And when they were straightened, no, when this was before these, well, this was when this brought up, they got surveying. And before that, when you came down along the old ridge line and that bridge to get into Constableville, which was the main road, and you had the Moonville Road coming in parallel to it, which is known as John Street today, you had to be pretty sharp to make the corner. And you could tell if anybody was coming from the south, because you couldn't see them because that bank was so high. Well, the state came to me, and this was just before the war, and asked me if they could cut the corner down. I said, sure, go ahead. I said, I drive it too, but I don't want to get killed. And it was a very dangerous spot, especially in the wintertime, snow, ice, and so forth. So when they were putting the new road up through and they resurveyed all this, they got a notice from the state that I had $125 coming because they had never paid me for removal of the bank that I had allowed to do. I never asked them for any pay. I didn't expect to get paid for it. I just told them, look, just for safety's sake, take the corner off. I said, you aren't going to destroy much of that field, but you're going to save some lives if you get it off of there, and I might be one of them. So I gave them, I just said, go ahead, cut it off. Didn't even ask them anything. And when they came to put the new road through and surveying through there, I got a check for $125 that was allotted to buy that corner, and I didn't expect to get anything for it because I didn't ask for anything. So you run into those, I mean, it's kind of a surprise, and it was a nice surprise. I mean,
Mhm.
back in those days, $125 is a pretty good piece of change.
Sure.
But that road going up through there, it hurt the farm to a good degree, there's no question about it. It put the barn practically on the main road.
Mhm.
And also, it, you know, driving hay wagons and tractors and so forth back and forth across there, because that is quite a hill.
Mhm. It is.
And it is a dangerous spot, there's no question about it. Be crossing it all the time.
Mhm.
But that's about the only thing that changed in the property itself, and that's about the only change that was made, was just putting that new road through there.
Now, does the Hall still own the fields surrounding it? And
We own
operate it?
16 acres around the hall.
And do you operate it as a farm at all?
Oh, no, the 16 acres is in front and goes all the way up to John Street and all the way down to where you drive in through the
So
stone
is it all
pillars.
lawns and gardens then?
Parking lot,
Mhm.
and then the rest of the garden. I want to mention the garden because we have, according to Dole and Dole, who have garden experts in the restoration business, and they claim it's probably one of the most outstanding gardens on the Eastern Seaboard. Because it's still in its original form, it hasn't been changed. The things have been added to it, like Casimir, I think it was, put the sundial in the center, which is very accurate. It's right on the ball. You can check your watch with it.
Mhm.
And the hedge was a buckthorn hedge, which supposedly was brought back from Ireland, from the Irish area where they came from originally, after they fled England. I might add this in here. The reason the family got it in England is because Sir William Constable signed a proclamation of the regicides when Charles I was beheaded. When Charles II came to the throne, he didn't think it was such a good idea, and of course everybody got out of town,
Mhm.
and that's when they went to England. And the amazing part was when I was over there 6 years ago, went into Westminster Abbey, and I knew Sir William was supposed to have been buried in Westminster Abbey, and I found one of the vergers walking around. I asked him if he could tell me where he was. He says, I'll have to go check that one up. And he went off and he came back in a few minutes, and he said, well, it's amazing, he isn't in the Abbey anymore. I said, well, he isn't. He said, no, he's out in the moat. He said, he was a Cromwellian. And after Charles I or II came in, and anybody that was instigating downfall of his father was dug up and thrown in chains and then thrown in the moat. He said, there's a brass plaque on the outside of the building that shows where he was thrown. So I said to the verger, I said, boy, it's amazing what your political affiliations can do for you. But that's a little story on that. But it's, the total history on this type thing just goes on and on.
Mhm.
Do you have anything else, Don?
Well, what you've given us is very, very good, but one of the things we want to do is to move into Tug Hill.
Well, I was waiting for you to bring that up because that's one of my favorite subjects.
Well, if we run this tape out, we've got 2 more with us today.
Well, good, because we can go on to Tug Hill. Tug Hill to me, and I've said this many a time, is a unique area of New York State. I don't think anywhere there's anything like it. First of all, it's a hill. It's not a mountain, similar to what we have in the Rockies or anything like that. It's a hill, and it's a plateau. On top, it's flat. People say, well, what do you mean it's a plateau? I said, there's no big landmarks. And it's very nicely to get lost up there because one ridge that you walk over looks like the next one, and they aren't very high. And there's no things that you could look up and say, well, that's Blue Mountain over there, so I know which way to go. When you're on Tug Hill, all you see is tops of the trees. And if you don't know where you're going, you can get in a lot of trouble unless you're following creeks or something. They generally will get you out. But according to surveys, I understand that it consists of 1,200,000 acres. It's a pristine type land that I think should be preserved. It has been so-called lumbered. I won't use the other term I use sometimes with it.
Go ahead.
No.
It has been raped, you might say, as far as the lumber industry is concerned. Something that a friend of mine and I were talking about this just this morning. He said, you know, John, we don't see any bears on Tug Hill anymore. I said, no, and they used to be plentiful.